Hey guys, we're at Studio Sweat, and today I'll be talking about how your anatomy affects your form and alignment while working out. So I'll be talking about things like your squat stance, the difference between traditional like parallel squats or a sumo squat, and how certain bodies are going to feel more comfortable in certain positions and how your anatomy affects that. I'm Sam, and I've been teaching Pilates for about 8 years, personal training for 5. I specialize in injuries and special populations, so I really like to get into the details and the differences between every body and how everyone will move more efficiently in a little bit of a different position. So exercises will not look the same as the person next to you. And I like to kind of encourage everyone to find what feels the best in their body rather than what a movement looks like. So the first thing I'll be discussing today is squat stance. So usually you'll see two common types of squats. You'll see a traditional squat, which is your legs parallel, hip distance apart. And then you'll see a variation of a sumo squat, which is legs wide and turned out. Now, I've taken some classes, done some workouts where the trainer is demanding that I turn my legs out, right? Or some people to keep their feet parallel. Now, the anatomy of your hips and the length of your thigh bones, those two factors dictate how a body can move, right? So the acetabulum, that's a nerdy word for your hip socket. Ball and socket joint, right? So the ball is your acetabulum, it's your hip. And then your femur is your thigh bone. The way it sits in there, it's very different in every body. So some people have a little bit more of an internal rotation or turned in position. Some bodies are more turned out. Usually dancers and people who sit at a casino all the time with their legs out tend to have more turned out legs. Not really many people are in a perfect parallel position, and everything that we do in our lives kind of affects that. So say I'm in a parallel position and I can't move. I can't hinge my hips, my back hurts, my neck hurts. I'm like, this doesn't feel right. What I'm gonna do is find the stance that feels good. It feels like it's parallel to you. Say you're in a sumo position and same thing, like, I can't do it right. So I'm gonna encourage you to think about what feels wide and turned out to you. What feels narrow and parallel to you. That's going to look different in everybody. Now I have kind of a little trick for you, and this is something that it took me a while to believe in until I felt it in my own body. So what you do is you close your eyes. You just are natural. You just let everything relax, just be. You're gonna jump and just land and stay there. Look at your feet. This is how my hips are. No one's hips are perfectly square. No one's hips are perfectly level. We're not born that way. And then everything we do in our lives kind of affects that. So ideally, I should be squatting like this, and that looks crazy, but it feels even to me. Now, if I try to line up my feet in a perfect position, then my hips are off, and that can cause more imbalance throughout the rest of your body. Your feet dictate the rest of your movement patterns, right? So if my feet are forced to be here, my knees, my hips, my spine, everything is gonna follow that. So I want my feet to be in the most natural position to where everything else feels even. So my hips feel square, my ribs, shoulders, hips all feel aligned. So rather than focusing on what an exercise should look like, I like to encourage my members, my clients, my students to go by what it feels like rather than what they think an exercise should look like, because there are so many different factors that will change that based on an individual body. So there's our difference between parallel and sumo squats. Now I'd like to talk about the spinal position. You'll see some people squatting with their spine more upright. I can't even do that, but you'll see more of like a vertical position. And then there's more of like a diagonal here. That is affected by the width of your hips, the length of your thigh bones, your femur bones, and as well as just your overall mobility. So say I have super tight hips, I'm not gonna be able to go back very far, right? Ankle mobility, there's so many things that will affect the range of motion and like the lever length of your spine, length of your legs. If you have a very long spine, you're going to be more upright. If you have a shorter spine, you're probably gonna need to lean forward more to get the tension into those heels, into those glutes, if that's what you're targeting. So if you ever have a trainer telling you that your spine must be vertical or anything that's not feeling good in your body, I encourage you to start thinking about, again, what feels right for you rather than forcing yourself into a shape that doesn't feel right. If you like this tip, go ahead and subscribe to our channel and you will find several more pro tips from our top trainers. So the next topic that I'll touch on is range of motion. So oftentimes I hear squat to a 90-degree angle, right? Not everybody can get that deep. Sometimes you'll hear bring your leg up to 90 degrees. You hear that on the mat with abdominals very often, like make that tabletop shape. Now, again, there are several factors that dictate how our bodies should be positioned. So if you're forcing yourself into an angle where you feel limited or you feel other areas taking over, if you feel all back and no abs, if you feel all neck and not the area that you're supposed to be focusing on, then I encourage you to find different variations. I'll demonstrate this on the mat with some abdominal work here. So if you're lying down and you're told to have your hip bones, your kneecaps, and your middle toes aligned, and I cue this very often, and this is something that I love doing these videos because it also teaches me how the things that I say are not effective for everybody. So there's several ways to say things, just like there's several ways to do things. So say I'm here with my hip bones, my kneecaps, and my middle toes aligned. I actually do feel like my left hip is a little bit higher, the left side is lifted off the mat, and the right side rib cage and hips are kind of pushed down more. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn my left leg out a tiny bit, and my hips are square, my ribs are square, my shoulders are square. So that looks crazy, it looks wrong, right? But my hips are square. My hips are supporting my spine. That's your stable base. You wanna focus on your points of contact here. If I align my feet, everything else is off. So if I align my hips, since they're the stability portion of your body right now, that is where I'm gonna get an even crunch here, right? If I'm doing something single leg, and this is why I love unilateral work, because you get to create more balance in your more or less dominant side. So if I do single leg, I actually do want to bring this hip, knee, and middle toe aligned, because this one is not gonna cause one side to overcompensate. So if it's a single-sided movement, totally fine to practice that alignment, and then this side that doesn't wanna do it can feel what it feels like without the stress of the other leg trying to like force it into position. So there's an example for abdominal work. So I have another example of abdominal work where your anatomy can affect your position, your alignment. So say we're doing abdominal work like you're leaning back on a ball. Sometimes we do the inflatable ball. Today I have this harder ball. You'll see two variations of abdominal work. There's a round back, which in Pilates we call a C curve. It's basically where you're tucking your pelvis and ribs together, flexing your spine from both directions to contract the muscles here. You'll also see a flat back variation where you're hinging at the hips, trying to keep your spine in the same shape. Now, for the hinge position, like some bodies are gonna naturally be rounded and some bodies will function better in that flat back. So, and I'll show you why, what affects that. So this actually is your pelvic anatomy. You can look at the lower back. Your lower back is going to look one of two ways. If you have more of an anterior pelvic tilt, that's kind of more of an arched lower back, and that's just you have more space on the front side and you have less space on the back side. And then you will see the bodies that are more tucked. So you have more of an anterior pelvic tilt or a posterior pelvic tilt. If your body's, and this is something that you're just born like, if you're in more of a posterior pelvic tilt, your body is going to appreciate that C curve, the tuck and rounded position, because it's used to being there. If you have more of this arch, your body is probably going to function better in that hinge, which doesn't mean we shouldn't try the others, because we do want to strengthen our bodies in ways that we're not comfortable with. But if it's something that's limiting your range of motion, right? So say you can do the tuck and you can do the hinge, I want you to practice both of them. Say you can't move, your hips are tight, you feel your neck, you feel your back, I want you to go to the one that feels more comfortable until you build the strength to be able to work up to the other variation. Another exercise that you'll see these two variations of the flat back hinge and the more rounded position is a deadlift. You may hear the cue, closing a car door with your butt, right? So that's like pushing your butt back, keeping that long spine. Now some bodies, if you have that posterior pelvic tilt, it's literally impossible to create that arch without flaring your ribs and losing control, putting pressure on the low back. So in a body that's very tucked here, you're actually going to want to do, it's called a Jefferson curl, and it's an articulation of the spine that's gonna stretch out these muscles. When you build the strength there, then you can have more control working up to that hinged position. So if you see someone deadlifting in the gym and you're like, oh my gosh, that person has terrible form, you don't know what it feels like to be in their body as they don't know what it feels like to be in your body. So again, another great example of how we all move very differently. So just because somebody looks crazy, my legs are off centered in my abdominal work, that's how I can actually find the most muscle contraction and the most efficient way to position my body. The next thing that I'll be talking about is tempo. But before I do that, go ahead and download my favorite app, Studio Sweat onDemand. You can get a free 7-day trial of our app, and you can find more of my workouts where I actually use a timer for most of my workouts since everybody moves at a different pace. So go ahead and check out this video and I'll be right back to talk to you more about tempo.
If you're looking for a convenient, motivating way to get or stay fit, Studio Sweat onDemand has a huge library of ad-free on-demand workouts with non-stop hot new releases, all featuring real people just like you. Start your 7-day free trial by downloading our app. It's risk-free with no credit card required. So get started today.
So for tempo, there's, again, many things that affect the pace that each body moves at. If you have longer legs, longer torso, it is going to take you much longer, say we're doing deadlifts again, to get into this position than someone with shorter, like thigh bones, the length of your thighs, the length of your spine. I can get there pretty quick. This is where someone who has a longer spine, they have more body to move, so it's going to take them longer to control that movement. Same thing with squats, right? And this also has to do with like strength and goals too. The more dominant muscles in your body, and what are you squatting for? Are you building muscle? Are you trying to maintain? There's all kinds of factors that will affect your tempo, and we can actually program the same exact exercise, say a squat, right? I'm gonna go down slow for 3, come up for 1. That would be sport specific. Maybe a basketball player, maybe somebody who needs to jump. They're gonna control it down and they're gonna power up because they need to practice jumping, right? Say I'm training a ballet dancer. Their movements are even tempo, everything is elongated and graceful. So I will have her or him squat slowly down, pause in the isometric, and work just as hard to come up as they did to go down. So that's an example of how tempo can be sport specific. So to see more examples of tempo and how we incorporate that into our workouts, our bar workouts on the Studio Sweat onDemand app are a great place to see those. I really hope that these tips encourage you to feel your body, to move in a range of motion and position that feels right for you.
Sam, thank you so much. That was awesome. I feel really encouraged to work within my own body with every exercise that I'm doing. We hope you do too. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel today and download Studio Sweat onDemand, where you can get your 7-day free trial, where we have tons of workouts where we encourage you to work with your body. We'll see you there. Thanks, Sam.